Greetings from the Philippines to the world. It's January 5, 2019, 5:10 p.m. here in Manila. Welcome to the year opener episode of Open for Business. We are on Facebook Live, on Eagle News, and also on our digital channel, eaglenewslive.com. I am Cesar Vallejos. Join me discover the latest news and information and business around the world. Stay ahead of the curve from vision to action. The peso is 52.49 against the dollar. And at the closing of trade last Friday, the Philippine Stock Exchange Index closed at 7,761.11, up 80.51 points, or 1.05%. Banking on the high growth of its gross national income, which is the gross domestic product of a country, and its international income, the National Economic and Development Authority sees the Philippines becoming an upper middle income country by next year. That's 3 years ahead of target. From its current lower middle income country status, NEDA's target is for the Philippines to become an upper middle income country as early as 2020 with its GNI per capita increase of 6.5%. With the challenge of inclusive growth, how will people from all social classes benefit from this economic growth? Is the vision to become an upper middle income country really within reach? For our year opener, we are proud to have with us one of the country's outstanding businessman and a technocrat and the author of the book, If the Philippines Had a Lee Kuan Yew. AG&P Chairman Jose P. Leviste Jr. will share his perspectives on the subject of Philippine growth in 2019 and beyond. But before that, let's see these headlines from our business news provider, Business Mirror.
This portion is brought to you by Business Mirror, a broader look at today's business.
Says ING. Apple cuts outlook as Chinese slowdown hits iPhone demand. Study urges government to tap creative pool to develop Philippine e-trade. And here are the details. Recent analysis from ING Bank Manila showed inflation likely fell below 6% in December 2018 as the cost of food and energy-related items declined significantly during the month. ING Bank Manila senior economist Nicolas Mapa said supply chains are already starting to normalize and global energy prices are plunging faster than the rate of increase seen earlier this year. The fourth quarter harvest season and imports of grains have helped stabilize the supply and price for most food items, with the latest government bulletin showing second week December rice inflation at 10.03% compared to November 2018's 14.46%, MAPA noted. The rapid rise in the prices of food, particularly rice, as well as petroleum, pushed inflation to accelerate for most of 2018. This reached a peak of 6.7% in September and October this year before coming down to 6% in November. MAPA further said that risks to this inflation outlook appear to be tilted to the downside with the expected signing of the rice tariffication law and further fall of international oil prices. Apple cut its revenue outlook for the first time in almost 2 decades, citing weaker demand in China, triggering a slump for Asian suppliers and a wave of lower price targets on Wall Street. Apple CEO Tim Cook said sales will be about $84 billion in the quarter ended December 29, down from earlier estimates of $89 billion to $93 billion. Apple posted sales of $88.3 billion in the fiscal first quarter a year earlier, so the new forecast would mean Apple is reporting a holiday quarter slowdown for the first time since Cook became CEO in 2011. The news sent its stock down as much as 8.5% in extended trading. The announcement, made in a letter from Cook to investors, comes after weeks of signals from inside Apple and its supply chain indicating the Cupertino, California-based company is struggling to sell the latest iPhones released in September. The flagship product earns Apple about 2/3 of its revenue and allows the company to generate more money from attached products like Apple Watches, AirPods, and services like Apple Music. While we anticipated some challenges in key emerging markets, we did not foresee the magnitude of the economic deceleration acceleration, particularly in Greater China, Cook wrote. Greater China, a region that includes the mainland, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, accounted for most of the revenue shortfall, but iPhone upgrades also weren't as strong as the company anticipated in some developed markets, Cook said. Several key Apple suppliers overseas had cut their revenue estimates during the past few months, suggesting something was amiss. In November, the company said it would stop reporting unit sales of iPhones, iPads, and Macs beginning in fiscal 2019. That sparked concern Apple wanted to avoid disclosing weak growth numbers. Apple stock had fallen 32% from an October peak to its close of $157.92 on Wednesday amid growing concerns about the iPhone. The CEO attributed much of the company's shortfall in its outlook to struggles in China that he pinned on the economy and rising trade tensions with the U.S. The government has to develop industry roadmaps and export strategies for digital products if it wants to exploit the multi-billion peso electronic commerce industry, according to a study. In a discussion paper titled Issues on Digital Trade by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, the government was urged to focus on creating strategies that will take advantage of the country's pool of creative talent. This, the study claimed, could be a way for the Philippines to develop its e-commerce industry. Given the country's pool of creative talent, in addition to the services where the Philippines has revealed comparative advantage, attention should be given to the promotion of digital products. An expert strategy could be developed promoting the creative industries such as copyright-based industries or CBIs, specifically core CBIs whose outputs can be digitally delivered over the internet, the study read. Roadmaps on press and literature, music, motion picture and video, radio and television, and photography will contribute to the country's digital trade platform. Core CBIs also include software and databases, visual and graphic art, advertising services, and copyright collective management societies. The study likewise stated that the government should seriously take investing heavily on creative services if it wants to improve its digital trade. It said opportunities arise from funding core CBIs, especially given likely risks to jobs from the full impact of the fourth industrial revolution. The Philippines has a relatively slow transition to e-commerce, also known as digital trade, according to the study, largely due to the poor internet infrastructure in the country. In the 2015 annual survey of Philippine business in industry, which covers the formal sector by the PSA, sales from the e-commerce transactions reached 44.4 billion pesos only. And when we get back, we will be talking with AG&P Chairman Mr. Jose P. Leviste Jr. Open for Business. We'll be back. Stay tuned. We are open for business, and we are here with the chairman of the AG&P, Mr. Jose P. Leviste Jr. Sir, thank you for coming and gracing the year opener episode of Open for Business. Sir, before I ask you, Sir Joey, about your vision for the business growth, as I have reported earlier, what happened in 2018 as far as Philippine business is concerned?
I think we had a good year, and our growth rate is certainly upper sixes, lower sevens, and I think this is good. No, we also have to take into consideration that we have had a lot of calamities in 2018, and these calamities affect the productivity, particularly of our agricultural sector. And therefore, it is not an easy year. But overall, I think we did well relative to the rest of the world. We are one of the fastest growing economies in the region. If my recall is correct, we're second only to India. And I think we're doing fairly well under the direction of the economic team of the president.
Sir, aside from the calamities that we experienced, there were also the introduction of policy reforms, including the train law. So, what do you think is the impact of these reforms to Philippine business, and do you think this will somehow improve it or sustain the growth that we already have?
Oh, absolutely. We need the train reforms because we cannot fund our build program without it. Now, I can understand that there is some concern by some sectors, but you also have to remember that some of the concerns about inflation are driven by external factors. When I say external factors, I mean the price of oil.
Yes.
And so, something which we have no control over.
That's right. But there are talks that it will, and there are some predictions that it will continue to go down. As a matter of fact, in the few weeks that we have had, the prices of oil prices have gone down. Do you think it will still continue to go down? What is the projection of the business?
Do I hope are two different things.
Okay, yes.
I hope the oil prices go down. You see, as the Philippines, we're a major oil importing country. Anytime the prices of oil gets up, it affects this country. Now, what we need to do is to make sure and pray that the oil prices soften further, that the oil prices, have even lower levels, so that the cost of our fuel and energy would be cheaper than it were if it were higher. Now, you have to watch the Philippines. A very good rule of thumb in our country is we're a highly mineralized country.
Okay.
And we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in gold, copper, and nickel, depending on which commodity. So, the higher the metal prices are, the better it is for the Philippines. The lower the oil prices are, the better it is for the Philippines. If it goes the other direction, that oil prices are high and commodity prices are down, then it's not good for the Philippines.
Okay. So, with all this data and with all this speculations, having key positions in both the PCCI and also the Chamber of Mines here in the Philippines, what are the policy changes or reforms that you want the Philippine government to adopt so that we can sustain this growth?
Well, I can speak for myself personally, and I know most of my colleagues in PCCI, and PCCI is the voice of business in this country. are generally happy with the economic management of our economic team. And we have distinguished technocrats in the government, the Secretary of Finance, Carlos Dominguez, the Budget Secretary, Ben Diokno, the Trade and Industry Secretary, Mon Lopez, and the Planning Secretary, Ernie Pernia, the Energy Secretary, Alcusi, the Environment Natural Resources Secretary, Roy Simatu. These are all professionals, and they have the fullest support of the President. And therefore, the general policy directions of our country are good. Now, frankly, what I'm concerned about is there's a little too much politics in this country. And I think that, the legislative branch of government should focus on legislation and let the cabinet run the economic policies of this country. So, but I guess that's part of the democratic process. But even in a democracy, one has to respect the different functions of the different branches of government.
Okay, sir. You mentioned about the economic team of the Duterte administration, and somehow you are satisfied with their performance. As a matter of fact, you're telling that they should do their business, and it is this economic team that should somehow drive the way towards the implementation of these policies. But sir, with the many roles that you have in the business sector, are you satisfied, and how do you somehow give your grade to the economic team of the government? Do you have a wish list as well on the things, on the reforms that you want them not to touch? Or are there, like, say for example, I've heard you talk in the latest construction congress, and during that forum there's somehow a debate on some of the issues in the construction business, specifically now that the government and the private sector is active in the build program of the government. So what's your take? Or what should remain untouched, and what should be given top priority so that this will continue to prosper and gain momentum?
Well, let's start with construction. You did mention construction, and I recall we were together at the construction summit at the Conrad Hotel. And the entry of foreign construction companies in the Philippines is welcome, especially in a situation where the domestic construction companies do not have the capacity and capability of fulfilling the requirements of the government's build program.
Okay.
Now, on the part of the foreign construction companies, my only advice to them is that they should touch base with the sector itself, they should touch base with the government itself, and they should partner with competent Filipino construction companies. And make the decision of whom to partner, not a political decision, but a technical decision. So, now, at the same time, there are some companies which can handle projects by themselves, and I'm talking the bigger companies in this country, and that's fine. I don't think the big companies are threatened by foreign companies wanting to step in, and the foreign companies can certainly benefit from the bigger companies in the Philippines. So it's you have to balance it, no? I personally, as a member of the board of PCCI and part of the PCCI board of directors, with our chairman George Barcelon, with our president Bing Lunhuko, we are also very much concerned on building SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And I think there's a role for various sizes of companies. No, the bigger ones will deal with the bigger ones, but the smaller ones should not be left behind.
Sir, it's very interesting to note that, especially with Open for Business, the focus really is to help entrepreneurs and startups. And you mentioned about PCCI's focus on small and medium enterprises. There is a lot of talk about, in many industries, about inclusive growth. Yes, a lot of the big corporations are getting a lot of the projects in the country, but how about the small and medium enterprises? In terms of inclusive growth, and we're looking at the data earlier about the gross national income. Somehow this should also impact on the smaller players. Do you think both the private sector and the government has enough programs to support SMEs?
Yes, the one taking the lead here is the Department of Trade and Industry. Secretary Ramon Lopez is very active in leading this sector, the development of SMEs. He's working very closely with Presidential Assistant Joey Concepcion, and we have a very active Go Negosyo program. It's a mentorship program, and I think it's well received all over the country. As a matter of fact, Go Negosyo has been exported also to the neighboring ASEAN countries. The concept and the philosophy.
Wow. Yeah. And basically, it's very active in the ASEAN as well.
Starting to be active. Of course, the base of Go Negosyo is the Philippines, no? And I myself am very supportive of the mentoring program. And I should be even more active, but the last one that I was present was the Go Negosyo program when they went to Lipa City in my home province of Batangas. I am the president of the Batangas Province Investment Council. I was appointed by Governor Dodo Mandanas, who's our chairman, and I work closely with him. Does not preclude me from working with the other provinces in this country. But naturally, Batangas is home, so I...
As a matter of fact, when we posted the announcement of your guesting, a lot of the Batangueños reacted. Some even commented, "Oh, one of the outstanding Batangueños, here in the Philippines." So, AG&P, you're chairman of that global institution, and one of the major concerns, or one of the sectors that's really given priority now, is power and energy. And we also covered the LNG summit, and one of the major players is your company, and the Philippines is opening up that market again because of the issues of the use of renewables, the renewable energy. What's your view on this? Specifically, there's a lot of issues on the use of the lower carbon footprint, and somehow there's always an ongoing debate on coal and the renewable energy. What's your thought, and what's your vision, both short term and long term?
I'm smiling because I am the director in charge of Environment and Climate Change of PCCI.
Okay.
And meaning I oversee the Committee on Environment and Climate Change, where we have professionals running it. People like Jess Reyes of Nestle. And so we all work closely together. But you're talking about energy. Let's divide it to two sections first. Let's get away from gasoline and fuel, and let's just focus on energy as related to power. I myself, our family has small investments in the renewable energy space. We are in solar, we are in wind, we are in hydro, on a small small project basis. And so I am committed to renewable energy. We have made investments into the sector, but I will be the first to admit that this anti-coal movement might be short-sighted.
Why is that so, sir?
Because if you shut down all the coal plants in this country, you will not have renewable energy. You will have blackouts and brownouts. So, the natural phasing of the renewable energy into this country has got to pace with the phase out of coal. You cannot just do this immediately, because you will literally plunge the country to perennial darkness. Now, on the coal side, what can be done is to desulfurize the coal, to manage the coal better, and because there is still a use for coal, you have to balance this. Now, admittedly, the long-term direction should be renewable energy, and I support that fully. But until we can supply all the requirements of this country, I think it is folly to shut down the coal sector.
But have you talked about timelines with the government? Is there a timeline of when to shut it down, when to minimize it? Is there a grand master plan also on that?
Well, the correct person to talk to is my friend Secretary Cusino, who's got an excellent team, and he's a very innovative energy secretary, because he is very supportive of renewable energy. He is even studying the possibility of nuclear for this country, and at the same time is studying how to improve, shall I say, improve by minimizing the carbon footprint of our coal-powered plants. But you cannot just do this, immediately. So I think the Department of Energy, and he's certainly got an excellent team there, would be the correct. He'd be the correct person to address this issue, because in the end, I'm in the private sector, and I can't even pretend to speak for government. They're friends of mine, and I'm supportive of them. But
okay, I understand, sir. Before we go into a break, sir, my question would be, because you also mentioned that you are the vice chair of the Committee on Climate Change and with PCCI.
I'm not the vice chair. I'm the director in charge.
Director in charge.
Yeah.
What is your view, and is Philippine business adopting sustainability projects and programs? Because based on a lot of studies that have been conducted, there's no other way for big companies but to come up with environmental programs and sustainability programs to ensure that they will continue, the planet would be sustainable enough for the future generations. Is Philippine business really doing that now, sir?
Yes, the Philippine business is sensitive to this. The Climate Change Commission is very active, and the chairman is very active. He's a professional, he's a technical guy, and I work closely with him. And it's good, no? But you have to look at climate change in the totality of the globe, no? And I have been told, and studies have been pinpointed, that we have to manage this, or else the next generation will be even buffeted with more storms and more, elements that will make the world as we know it today even look benign. But the main changes in the world has to be done by the developed countries, no?
Yes.
The US, the Chinas of the world, Japan, the big countries are the ones that can really affect the global situation. Now, ourselves, for the Philippines, we must do our share. We must do what we can. And I certainly am very supportive of that. All of my colleagues in PCCI are very supportive of that. And that's what we want to do.
There's more to talk about with Mr. Leviste, specifically on his other roles in Philippine business, and we'll check and visit and see his the books that he authored when Open for Business returns. Stay with us. Open for Business is back, and with me is Mr. Josepe Leviste Jr., the chairman of AG&P, and you are also the vice chair of the Chamber of Mines. We cannot really. That's a hot topic because that's mining, and we left off with the environmental concerns, and we go back there again. So, what's the main issues in mining, and recently, I think this year also there was debates on the issues in mining. What do you think would be the future of mining in 2019 and beyond?
Well, I think the answer could be best addressed by the Cabinet Committee, MICC, the Mining Industry Cabinet Committee. This is chaired by Secretary Dominguez. Carlos Dominguez, the Secretary of Finance, and also by the DNR Secretary, Roy Simatu. And we have absolutely no complaints with them. They are very balanced and professional in their approach. And there has been progress. Now, I would be remiss in my honesty with you if I told you that the industry was happy at the first DNR secretary.
Okay.
I'm talking about my friend Gina Lopez.
Okay.
And I think Gina is a very sincere person, but I think she was out of her element, no? And so she was a little harsh on the industry, and canceled existing contracts by press release. And let's just charge it to her being new in government. But fortunately, the situation has been rectified by the Commission on Appointments, by the delegation from the Senate and delegation of the House, who did not confirm her. And the President gave the country a new DNR secretary who is much more balanced, much more professional, much more rational in his addressing the industry. I'm talking about Secretary Roy Simatu. And so, but the demands of the DNR is not only the NR side, the natural resource side. The demands also include the environmental side. And the Secretary Simatu was only 24 hours a day. And he's been very busy with the rehab of Boracay.
Yeah.
But just to be fair to him, he is very open to the industry. He's very strict. He's very tough. But at the same time, he's very rational and reasonable, and he has met us. If I recall, as a group, and when I say group, I don't mean just the members of the board, about 200-300 mining company executives with environmental executives, at least almost half a dozen times, about 5 times if my recall is correct. And so we feel that he has an ear that listens, and he is somebody we can work with. And we feel also the President trusts him, and the President is comfortable with him. So I think the situation is much better now. Now, I'll be very frank with you. In the last meeting we had, during the open forum, we were asked, whether we had any suggestions towards the end, I raised my hand, and said I had some suggestions, and we know each other because we're both Ilocanos.
Okay.
My mother is Ilocana, and we speak to Ilocano to each other.
Okay.
And then I suggested, sir, this does not concern Oceana Gold at all. But if we want to be a major copper country in the world, if we want to be a major copper power in Southeast Asia, all we need to do is start 3 projects which have already been permitted, which have already been approved. And I have nothing to do with these projects. I mean, I know the executives and I know the owners. They're also friends of mine. Number 1, the biggest one is Tampakan. If Tampakan could get started, and the second one is King. If King could be started, and the third one is Silangan. If it could be started, I tell you, it will make us a major copper country in this world. It will, and copper is always needed. You know, the problem sometimes of gold is just a unit of value. There is chaos in the world, the price of gold goes up. You know, there's stability in the world, the price of gold goes down. But copper, you need copper. It's called for electricity, for transmission, for everything, you need copper. And if these 3 copper companies, copper mines, could be started, that would be fantastic. And they're all in Mindanao.
Oh, what's keeping it, sir, from
some local resistance. And DNR is, of course, studying the matter carefully, properly, and as they should rightly do so. But if we could just get those 3 projects get going, this country will be a major player in the copper sector.
Basically, sir, with what I have been getting also from the business summits that Open for Business is covering, there's a lot of investments, there's a lot of projects, and a lot of investors are coming in. But sometimes they feel that there is no clear-cut policy by the government, and somehow that stops them from going further. So sometimes it's the slowness of the bureaucracy, although we learned recently of the high impact of the ease of doing business here in the Philippines, and slowly it's a lot of people are feeling the impact of ease of doing business. But what are the issues in doing business in the Philippines to make it faster, to make these investments from proceeding to a faster rate? Example, sir, is the Build campaign. A lot of hype and a lot of news on it, and investors are already coming in. And now we are looking at this golden infrastructure year. So do you also feel that? Is that do you, as a representative of various business sector associations, you feel that the government has to be come up with a more speedy, faster process and delivery of services, specifically in assisting businesses both local and foreign?
First of all, we must realize government cannot do everything, no? And second, I welcome, PCCI welcomes the ease of doing business. But the ease of doing business has different degrees of implementation. No? Some areas, it's more effective. Others, it's a little slower. This is where the imperfections of the bureaucracy come into play. No? So the movement is not as fast, and it's not as fast equally. But the general direction is there. The president is very restless when it comes to provision of services. And this cabinet are very supportive of this move. And they're all working very closely together. And I always say, and I meet people who are a little sometimes disappointed that things would even be faster. I always tell them I prefer a government which does too much than a government that does too little. And I prefer a government that does everything than a government that does nothing. So that's how I personally feel. No? And those of us in PCCI are supportive of the government. Admittedly, not everything is perfect. For example, we can move faster in the conversions, of land. Agricultural land cannot be used for industrial use, and they have got to be converted. And so there are sectors. Our agricultural sector, could be more productive. But again, there is the elements. I mentioned earlier. When a typhoon hits the areas, when there are landslides all over the place,
yes,
you forget about your rice productivity for now.
Correct.
So we have to be resolute. We have to be focused, and we have to be resilient, and we just have to keep on moving.
Sir, you've joined the President Duterte in his various business trips. Like you were part of the business delegation in Japan, in India, in China, and many other parts of the world, like Korea. My question there is, how do foreign investors perceive Philippine competitiveness, and what specific sectors of the Philippine business are they eyeing here in the Philippines?
Well, it also depends on what kind of investors, no? The countries you mentioned, Japan, China, Korea, they're interested in the Philippines because we are in the same neighborhood. They are less afraid of the Philippines. Okay. Russia has a certain fascination with the Philippines.
Yeah.
The U.S. is, the Philippines is part of their backyard. Now, the other ASEAN countries are also, you'll be surprised, interested in what we have to offer. And there have been suggestions that we cooperate, on various issues. So it really depends on what is their interest. And
but in your interaction with them, sir, what industries are they really looking forward to tap here in the Philippines?
Well, I tell you what, they're after a big market. 106 million people is a lot of people, number one. Two, they're after our strategic position, strategic location. We are literally the northern part of ASEAN, and we are the closest to Korea and Japan physically among the ASEAN countries.
Yes.
Taiwan is just next door. So there is a lot of synergy here. Now, our biggest asset, I think, is also our people.
Yes.
Because
Agree.
countries like Japan are in need of people. Countries like Russia are in need of people. Even China are in need of people. They need 100,000 Filipinos who can teach English to the Chinese.
That's right.
So we welcome this. We are supportive of this. The private sector entity that focuses on this is ECOP, the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. And that's also a sister affiliate. We work closely with them in PCCI, and we support their moves to generate employment. As we support moves of Philippine exports to promote exports of Philippine products, because we cannot be a country that does not produce anything.
That's right.
I mean, in the end, you've got to produce something.
Correct.
So
either a product or a service.
That's right. That's right. So, but I think that we are fine now. The individual questions, I mean, to be invited by the President to join his delegation is, of course, a privilege for the private sector. But the private sector can only benefit if it does staff work. if before you go to, for example, I was part of the delegation that went to Israel and Jordan. We studied ahead of time what do the Israelis need, what do Jordanians have, what you just cannot get your plane ticket and fly and and meet the president and the economic team and the cabinet in some foreign capital. You've got to do the stuff work also.
Sir, speaking of President Duterte, this was a book you wrote in 2015. If the Philippines had a Lee Kuan Yew, how do you how can you reassess when you look back producing this book? Is President Duterte the Lee Kuan Yew of the Philippines?
Well, first, let us qualify it first.
Okay.
This book came out in September 16,
yes,
2015.
Okay.
He was not yet president.
Yes.
So, and there's a story there. I was going to go to BOA for the BOA conference in Hainan with President Ramos and Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew just passed away. And so we, President Ramos and I were together, and while we were in BOA, I was watching TV at night, and after our meetings, and I was focused on the Singaporean media. And I noticed the outpouring of people for Lee Kuan Yew. So when we came back, I've always admired the Prime Minister. When we came back, I was going through the newspapers. There are so many articles written on Lee Kuan Yew. And
he also talked a lot about the Philippines.
That's right. Sometimes not in flattering terms.
Exactly.
So when I was reading the newspaper articles, he was covered all over the world. But I said, I think this is a good anthology. If I can put together the articles of what the Filipinos think of Lee Kuan Yew, because if I don't do this now and nobody does it, it will all be forgotten because we all forget and move to the next thing. And that's the background of the book. I must have found about 40 articles written local. I didn't want what Kissinger said. I didn't care what the foreigners said. I just wanted the Filipinos. And that's what that book's all about. And
now when you revisit it, sir, how do you, if you were to write it again or produce it again, is it still the same thing, or is President Duterte somehow qualifies to the role of Lee Kuan Yew?
The answer is yes and no. They are the same in the sense that they are both strong leaders. They are the same in the sense that they are both anti-corruption. They're the same in that they are both lawyers. But let's put it this way: President Duterte has got a more vivid and interesting vocabulary. Okay, which is what we Filipinos love and which we Filipinos enjoy. We are comfortable with that. Whereas Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew is not as colorful in his language, but that does not make him less a leader or President Duterte less a leader. And you have to remember, Singapore is a highly urbanized island city country. The Philippines has 7,000. I can't even give you the exact number because that depends whether it's high tide or low tide.
Correct.
7,000 islands. So the constituency of President Duterte is much bigger.
Yes.
He's got 106 million people to worry about. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew at the time had about 3-4 million people. So you cannot compare them.
Yes, in terms of management.
You cannot compare,
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, I certainly am glad we have a president like President Duterte because I like strong leaders. I like tough leaders. I want leaders who've got a vision. And, that's just my style. That's why I admire Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew because he's a strong leader too.
We're running out of time, Sir Joey, and you have another book. It's called Transitions, Essays on the Philippines and the Pacific Rim. If you have to rewrite this book, how would you rewrite it? Have we transitioned, based on my earlier reports, the earlier report, we want to transition from a lower middle income country to a middle or upper middle income country. Is that realistic? Can we transition to that phase?
Absolutely. But we will need strong political will. We will need less politics. And we need more education. We need to, the difference between other countries and ourselves. I'll give you an example. At one time, we had 50 MSs in the Bureau of Mines, an equivalent number of PhDs, because we were sending our best and brightest abroad.
Okay.
Just as the Indonesians were, the Vietnamese were, and the other Asian countries, with one difference. When they came back and they studied abroad, they went back to government, they were given assignments, and there was a program for them.
Whereas in the Philippines...
In our case, we send them abroad, they come back, and we don't have a program for them. Okay. This is way before the time of Secretary Simatu.
Okay.
So therefore, this is 20 years ago when this all started. So you can see that our best and brightest are not utilized to its fullest. And the best example of this is the Chinese. The Chinese government is run by technocrats. The Chinese cabinet members are mainly professionals. They're not politicians. They cannot. It's not how many votes they can deliver. President Xi Jinping couldn't care less. I mean, he wants to get the best and the brightest, which is what President Duterte is trying to do: get the best and the brightest. Your question, and these articles are all mine. The others was I just put them together. The one thing I missed in my writings from 86 to 92, I did not predict the rise of China. Because we were still mesmerized at that time. That was the height of the Japanese resurgence. And I tell you what China has done in the last 40 years, or the period, before that and during that, from Deng Xiaoping, when he started his tour of southern China, is just phenomenal. And so if there is an economy we need to study, it must be how the Chinese do it.
I see.
Because, don't get me wrong, I don't speak Mandarin, I go to China very often, but I did not study there, no, I studied in the US. In retrospect, if I knew then what I know now, I might have, studied Mandarin when I was younger.
Okay. We're running out of time, and I hope we can have Mr. Joey Leviste again be back here in Open for Business to talk more about other things. But before we ask him to say his parting words, we'd like to know, sir, your advice to entrepreneurs and startups. Being one of the country's outstanding businessman and technocrat, what is it that Philippine businessmen, especially the ones in the small and medium enterprises, should learn from this, and will they be excited in 2019 and beyond? What's in it in the Philippine market? What's in it in Philippine business? Your words of wisdom, sir, to the entrepreneurs.
I'm never embarrassed to give credit where it's due. Let me answer this question by saying that there are 3 countries that I'm fascinated with, aside from ASEAN and our neighbors in Northeast Asia, and they all start with the letter I.
Okay.
One is India, because it's as big as China, moving faster than China in some ways, and it's a democracy. Okay. The second is Italy.
Okay.
The Italians, they are the artists of the world, they're the best designers. And, we joint venture with the Italians, and I'm fascinated with them. I will give you, to answer the question on entrepreneurs, the third is Israel.
Okay, yes.
And I've always been fascinated with Israel. And during the anniversary of AIM, they had a forum and a dinner.
Yes.
And they invited a Nobel laureate. Yes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was
Danny Shetman.
Yes.
Yes. You remember Danny?
Yes.
Dr. Danny Shetman. And I'm so excited to meet him because he's the first Nobel laureate that I've met, It's like eating in a Michelin restaurant. You're excited.
Okay. Yes.
And so you remember his speech? He says, the problem with Filipinos is we are afraid to fail.
Yes.
We are embarrassed with failing. And that is not the culture of Israel. Mm-hmm. Because Israel is a startup nation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And all these new developments are mainly out of the Israeli technology. Mm-hmm. And so one country we need to study also is Israel and the Israelis. We have a long relationship with them.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, if I may end with an example on energy, there is an Israeli company which was awarded a service contract to explore for oil and gas in the Philippines, Ratio Petroleum. And I was privileged to have been present, just coincidentally, at the palace when their service contract was signed. And my friends from the Department of Energy were kind enough to invite me. And so I attended the signing ceremonies. And it's fantastic. Ratio Petroleum has discovered big oil and gas reserves, not only offshore Israel, but in Latin America. Mm-hmm. And because of Ratio Petroleum, Israel now is effectively self-reliant on oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And if they have the same luck, God willing, in their oil exploration in the Philippines, who knows, we may even join OPEC.
Wow, that's perfect. That's a very, very bright, final note, sir. And we all are also very lucky because the ambassador of Israel came here also and graced the show ASEAN in Focus to talk about agriculture, startups, and the relationship between the Philippines.
You mean the new one, Rafi?
Yes.
Not the old one, Effie.
Both of them.
Both.
Here,
they're both great gentlemen. They're fantastic people.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Joey Leviste, for gracing Open for Business. We hope that you will be back again because an hour of discussion with you is not really enough, to get your thoughts and insights on a lot of things. Don't leave us. Keep watching because when we get back, our term of the week and our code of the day when Open for Business returns. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. Sir, salamat. In our term of the week, you take a refresher of business terms to make you updated, more informed, and ready to make smarter business decisions. Our term is business growth. Business growth is a process of improving some measure of an enterprise's success. Business growth can be achieved either by boosting the top line or revenue of the business with greater product sales or service income, or by increasing the bottom line or profitability of the operation by minimizing costs. And our quote of the week comes from Tom Barrett. He said, "Chaos in the world brings uneasiness, but it also allows the opportunity for creativity and growth." Join us again next Saturday, 5 p.m. Philippine time for another episode of Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business, and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch us again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page. and on eaglenewslive.com. Also visit postinglive.com for news and updates on Open for Business. Catch me later at 9 p.m. and every Wednesday also at 9 p.m. on Net25's Eagle News International as I report more business news here and around the world. For Open for Business, this is Cesar Vallejos. Happy New Year to everyone.